It's Tuesday, and you're welcome to Jasiri, the space where we slow down the headlines and dig into issues shaping our lives, our politics, and our future. Today, we're taking on a conversation that sits at the intersection of democracy, power, and inclusion. Nigeria's push for special seats for women in parliament. It's a proposal that has sparked hope, debate, resistance, and one that focuses or forces us to ask hard questions about who gets represented, who gets left out, and what fairness really looks like in our political systems. This isn't just a women's issue, it's a governance issue, and it's one that could redefine how Nigeria's democracy works. But first,
a tweet from our very own chess master and the founder of Chess in Slums Africa, Tunde Onakoya, has taken some people down memory lane. He shared a deeply personal reflection about his secondary school experience that I believe almost all Nigerians will relate to. He said that one of his biggest regrets was allowing teachers to convince him that art class was for dullards, while science class was reserved for the smartest students. Here's what he posted. One of my greatest regrets in life was letting the teachers in my secondary school convince us that art class was for dullards and science class for the smartest students. I was excellent at debates, loved words, and really wanted to be a lawyer, but they wouldn't let me. They made that choice for me before I understood what it meant. I'm pretty sure this was a moment that altered the trajectory of the lives of many Nigerian kids. And he's very right, because a lot of people were able to key into what Tunde was reflecting on. So let's take a few reactions. The fact that schools don't have trained and qualified career coaches and counselors available to students has left a lot of kids with unrealized potentials. Kids need access to professional advisory, people trained to look beyond outdated biases. Switched from arts to science in SS1, aced my grades, went ahead to earn a degree in architecture, practiced for a bit, but today I work in marketing communications and as a brand strategist. Life surely isn't linear. Wow, I thought this ended with my generation. My dad decreed that I would be a medical doctor. I took science courses even though my heart was in the arts and I was really good at it. I made mediocre grades and ended up with a degree in biochemistry. I think I would have been a good thespian. I lived for the stage growing up. I would always tell my kids, do whatever makes you really happy. Go for your passion and you'll be fine. America will take care of you. My daughter was brilliant in both the arts and the sciences and painted studio quality pieces. I was very proud of her. I imagined her with a beret and cigar, making $50,000 for each artwork. We would be rich. She ended up being a pediatrician. She's poor but happy. Her dad is poor. Mine was struggle. I fought to be in art class in secondary school because of my love for literature, because I wanted to study fine arts or theater arts. I survived in secondary school against all odds, but guess what? I didn't survive because parents made me study banking and finance. I gained freedom to do what I wanted during NYSC. It was a war. Absolute disaster of an approach to education, and it's still adversely affecting Nigeria and other African countries to this very day. I come from the you had to be a doctor, male, or lawyer, female generation, or bust, NFA generation. I don't know what that meant. Storytelling, embellished with aesthetic effects, rules the world, since communication remains the most powerful skill of all, in my honest opinion. And let's take this as the last one. It's such a sad commentary, I can relate, but I'm glad I dared the consequences and left the science class in the second term while in SS1. I just know I am better off doing my literature, government, and CRK, and I'm glad I did to this day. We need to get into schools and help guide younger ones to make better decisions by picking subjects they are naturally good at. I would say, and etc., and etc., and etc. I didn't have this situation, so I can't talk too much about it.
Well, I had this situation. So when you see me, you think, you know, I went to, I did arts, right? But I was actually a science student.
Oh, wow.
Yes, I was. So I always wanted to become a doctor or a pilot, because that was the standard back then. You know, every parent wanted their child to be a doctor, a pilot, you know, a lawyer, and all
engineer.
An engineer. But then I was in science class and I was failing woefully in science class. SS1, SS2 first term, but from the second term I actually picked up and I did very, very well. But meanwhile, while I was in sciences, right, a lot of my friends who were in arts, I would always envy them. I'd be like, I feel I am meant for the arts, so why am I still in sciences? I really didn't know what I wanted to become while I was in sciences, honestly, but I knew that, oh, it might either be doctor or whatever, but there are so many choices, right? So I did so well in sciences, but guess where I ended? Social sciences, which is mass communication. That was what I studied.
But that's also considered arts.
It is?
Yeah, it's also considered the arts,
you know, but then, but I feel like if I had that background from the get-go, the government, the arts background, I would have done a lot better. Even in school, I was so playful, God. I was playful.
And I think, so when I came back, I think that's one of the things I heard, that they considered art students to be people who weren't serious.
Laid back.
Who were laid back, and that's where you just, when you can't cut it in sciences, you go into arts. Is the same thing? Is it the same that happens in South Africa?
Oddly enough, I think I can relate with Tolu. I didn't have that experience. I think I used to like to sing when I was growing up. So my mom was one of those, if there was like idols, essay or whatever, my mom would allow me to go to the auditions and all.
Really?
Yes. But she just always had that thing, okay, do whatever you want to do, but make sure that you get the qualification that makes sense in case this fails.
Yeah.
And I think going back to what Tolu said, for them it's always it's fine, do it on the side as a hobby. In case it fails, there's always like a fallback plan. And it's always just been like that. Oddly enough, in South Africa, entertainment is not the industry you go into because life is just not lifing and you're creative. If I can tell you the industry.
What is it? Yeah? Is the police.
Oh, are you serious?
As what?
Just the police officer. Like,
is respected in society, or it's...
No, that's where, when it's not making sense, even if you're talented, if you just cannot get by, it's
just go
so,
there,
so it's almost literally the same here, because unfortunately in some situations, many Nigerians feel that it's the worst of society, not necessarily the worst, but not the best people who could be in the police are actually in the police.
Police and military as well.
And police and military.
Yeah.
And there's actually studies about that as to why some people gravitate, even if they could do other things, why some people gravitate to military or security sort of things, because it's
the
psychology.
Last option.
They like control. Exactly. It gives them a sense of power when a lot of times in their daily and regular lives, they're powerless.
And it's also their sure bets in case you do not get, it's a sure bet because the government and everything.
And I think this thing that Tunde really brought up, and you can see there are a lot of people who, the parents had good intention. We all tend to have good intentions as parents, but we are not the only ones who know, how do I phrase this? We don't always know what is best for our child. We know what we think is best. But sometimes we don't always know what is actually best for the child. We have our projections. From the time most women are pregnant, their families, the fathers, they have an idea of what they see this child being without thinking of what the child himself or herself could be best at and could actually excel at. So we didn't have this. So I went to a special school anyway, but everybody did everything. So I've done chemistry, I've done physics, I've done algebra, God, I hated algebra. I'm an art student at heart, but I had to do everything. You had to pass. I did it up to AP level. By the time I was graduating high school, I already had 3 university credits because I did AP Econ, AP American History, and AP something else. And so everybody had to do everything. But you had a guidance counselor, which is why the first tweet is very important.
Very important.
You had a career guidance counselor in school who, by the time it's your second year, your third year, you're supposed to be looking towards, okay, what university am I going to? What line of work am I interested in? What degree do I want to pursue? They've already started putting you in mind to start thinking about that. There is even an aptitude test they made us take online, and they come back and it'll tell you what like top 5 careers they think you're best suited for. Because it cuts a lot of stuff out.
It makes a lot of sense, but we don't have, a lot of that, or we don't even have that in Nigeria.
Do we believe it's important? You can't have something if you don't even think it's an important asset.
So I think this trajectory that I'm in right now, right, I switched myself because, social sciences, I studied, I was in sciences. I wrote JAM and I wrote science courses, social science courses. So I had a choice. I had 2 choices, right? Either switch to a science course or a social science course. So I pursued a social science course, and the first choice was, I think I've said it here before, geography. Second choice was mass communication. I had nothing, I had no idea about mass communication and everything. But then I spoke to myself, I was like, I've always wanted to be an art student, so why not just
This was the
build
opportunity.
towards it?
But excuse me, please, what were you going to do as
I don't know. I really don't know. I really do not know.
No shade, though, really,
No,
but I'm just...
honestly, maybe just go around, you know, be a cartographer or go and, I don't know.
But you know another thing,
I really have no idea. See, at some point I sat down and I told myself, I said, oh, this is an option. I think God put this, you know, in place for me. So what if I decide to go into sciences? Look at my physics results. Look at my chemistry results. It's going to be a disaster. Mass communication it is.
But
Wow.
And I got it immediately.
Another thing I came to find in Nigeria, and I don't know if it resonates with the tweet, I also came to find that people tend to study what they're not going to do, like after they finish.
They just need a degree.
Yes, I've noticed that someone is going to tell me they did zoology. I'm like,
But
It's about
there's
the
zoologists, there's
certificate.
work, but I think about it in terms of where does that bring, what kind of work does it have for you in Nigeria?
In Nigeria,
What's your career
exactly.
trajectory
The
from
career
a degree
path,
like that?
yes.
But a lot of times, because of so many issues, whether it's strikes, whether it's limited career options, people will just get at least one first degree and then sometimes follow their hearts.
But you know, when you say zoology, a lot of people feel, oh, you'd end up working in the
With
zoo. But
animals.
it's not that. It's just that we do not have the capacity here in Nigeria. You can study animals. You can do research on animals. You know, in fact, I'm sure they're like animals that we do not know about that are in Nigeria, that exist in Nigeria. What if you found that one out? If you had the capacity, you'd be able to, you know, bring it to the fore that, oh, yes, we found a new animal and everything. Oh, you name it, you know.
But everything is changing now because content creators are making more money than 9-to-5ers.
that's the problem.
So parents, you need to loosen those reins.
That's
Yes, you
another
want to brag about my daughter is a doctor, is a tailor. I said tailor. My daughter and son is a doctor, is an engineer, is a lawyer. But there's so many new careers opening up, and especially now with the advent of AI, cloud technology, so many things. There are new careers. Please, to a point, let your kids follow their hearts. Yes, guide them, but don't mandate it, because I think a lot of people, sometimes it pushes them 5 years off their trajectory. And life would be so different if they had had the opportunity
earlier
to head in the direction they wanted.
Thinking about it, I think I would have done a lot better as an athlete. Because I was
That should take us on a break. You're
I'm
confused. So you went from, what did she say? From
geography to mass comm.
Now that's we'll talk about it off air. Take us on a break. Now it's athletes. Track and field. Take us on a break.
It's still ahead on Jasiri, right? A conversation that could reshape Nigeria's political future. As the debate over special seats for women gains momentum at the National Assembly, we ask, is this the breakthrough the Nigerian women have waited for, or a step too far in redesigning democracy? Now, joining us is Abosede George-Ogan. She's founder of the Women in Leadership Advancement Network and a leading advocate for women's political inclusion. We'll unpack what the bill really proposes, the resistance it faces, and what it could mean for representation, governance also, and power in Nigeria. That conversation is next. Stay with us.
You're welcome back. In case you're just joining us, you are watching a Jasiri. Now, in an interesting story, Nigeria is on the cusp of making history if only lawmakers can take a very bold and yet courageous step. This conversation goes to the very heart of democracy, representation, and power in Nigeria. Now, Nigeria is Africa's most populous country. Women make up almost half of our population. They drive its economies, lead its homes, dominate voter turnout in many communities. Yet when the decisions are made at the highest levels of power, women are largely missing from the room. Today, Nigerian women occupy less than 5% of seats in the National Assembly and state legislatures, one of the lowest representation rates in the world. For decades, this imbalance has been explained away as a matter of culture, political ambition, or readiness. But many women argue the real issue is structural, a political system shaped by money politics, violence, and godfatherism, and deep-seated patriarchy that makes fair competition almost impossible.
Now, a bold proposal is on the table. The Special Seats Bill, as we're calling it colloquially, seeks to amend Nigeria's constitution to create reserved legislative seats for women at both the National Assembly and the state houses of assembly. Supporters say it's not about charity or lowering standards. It's about correcting a historic imbalance and ensuring that women's voices are not just heard, but represented where laws are made. Critics, however, raise questions. Is this democratic engineering or democratic progress? Does reserving seats empower women or risk sidelining them? And can Nigeria's political culture truly change through legislation alone? At a moment when the National Assembly is debating whether this bill should move forward, the stakes could not be higher, not just for women, but for the future of inclusive governance in Nigeria. Now, to help us unpack what this bill really means and why it has resurfaced now and whether it can truly break long-standing barriers, we're joined by Abosede George-Ogan. She's the founder of Women in Leadership Advancement Network. She's a leading advocate for women's political inclusion and governance reform. And Abosede has relocated to Abuja to make sure that this bill sees the light of day. Abosede, it's always a pleasure to have you. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on Jasiri.
Good morning, ladies of January. Always a delight. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Abosede, let's start with an update of where things stand, regarding the vote on the special legislative seats for women. We're expecting a vote last week, and that was moved, right? Are we expecting voting this week, or will Nigerian women have to wait again?
Well, I mean, the first thing that I would like to clarify is that this reserved seats bill, or special seats bill, as we're calling it, is actually one of a group of constitutional amendment bills. So I think that is really important that that is clear. So the National Assembly has not in any way isolated the reserved seats bill, is delaying the voting on that. I think it's really important that people understand that, because as part of those constitutional amendment bills is a bill on local government, on state policing, and other critical bills, right, that other interest groups might have, a stake in. But as far as Nigerian women are concerned, the most important constitutional amendment bill is this one. So where are things? Well, as you said, we were expecting voting to be last week. We know that the National Assembly is seating this week. I think they will be seating between today and Thursday. So miracles do happen, but I think we're keeping a close eye for now.
Okay. Abosede, let's take a look at the basics, if you don't mind, because there still seems to be, a bit of confusion around this bill. When we're talking about special seats for women, what exactly is being proposed in this constitutional amendment? How many seats are we talking about, and how would these seats be filled?
Fabulous. I think that's such an important question. So what we are currently proposing is very simple. And I think the first thing to outline is that this is to correct a structural imbalance. And one of the things I always say is, if it was that simple, then we would have women there. And this is the point, to the point that Tolu mentioned earlier, where some people think this is tokenism. So what does the bill propose? The bill proposes additional seat in the Senate per state, right? So that gives us 36. And then at the House of Representatives, one additional seat, but remember, we have the FCT represented as well, okay? And then at the State Assembly, it is proposing 3 additional seats in each 36 states. So that's a total of 182 seats, both at the National Assembly and the State Assembly. And what this means is that we do have to amend some sections of the Constitution, right? And that is why it is part of the constitutional amendment. But let me also make a note, because somebody is watching and saying, is this going to be in perpetuity? No, it's not. It has built in a sunset clause of 4 electoral cycles, so 16 years. And as I said, because it's to balance what is currently imbalanced, we will evaluate where we are after 4 electoral cycles, and then we can move forward. So that's what this bill is proposing. By the way, 41 out of 54 African countries have an affirmative action bill. So it's nothing grand that we're doing. We're just lagging behind. We're currently 54, and that's not where we should be as Nigeria. So this is just to correct an imbalance.
And even being the most populous country on the African continent, we should be leading those charges, not playing catch up as it is. So interestingly enough, I was going to ask you about the timeline, because when we hear about this, a lot of people don't talk about the fact that there is a timeline, as you said, a sunset clause, for 4 electoral cycles, 16 years. So the question there is, do you think that the timeline works? And do you think it will be adequate enough to address the structural gaps that have then been in existence for several decades? So it's not to say, I understand the process of reviewing over the next 4 election cycles, but is that enough to adequately give us the potential of what the bill has to be able to readdress or to address?
Yeah, and I think, so that's a really important question. So let's look at it, right? If this bill passes and next electoral cycle, this is activated, what does it mean? Brilliant question. It means that each political party would have to field women in these seats. What does that already do to the pipeline of women who aspire? Do you know what I mean? What does that do to the value chain of politics that I often talk about? A woman will then most likely hire a female director general for her campaign, right? A woman will most likely have like a team of more women who are actively participating in politics and in that value chain. So can you see the ripple effect? So more aspirants, definitely more candidates, and then definitely more women elected, right? That means people are going to be building capacity, okay? That means people are going to learn how to fundraise. Because as you mentioned earlier, we still have money politics. But guess what? People are going to come up with more innovative ways to fundraise, whether that's crowdfunding, whether that's cloud funding.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's going to just energize the system in a way where, Tolu, I have no doubt that in 4 electoral cycles, there is no way that the structure will look the same. It's almost like a house that you start to renovate, right, and change the structure for 16 years. There is no way that house will look the same. And I think that is exactly what is going to happen with this bill.
All right, so Abosede, now for decades, Nigeria has had, democratic elections, political parties, and constitutional guarantees of equality. Yet we see women remain almost invisible in our legislatures. From your experience, why has Nigeria consistently failed to translate women's population size and voter strength into actual political power?
And I want to add an amendment. We may know and you may know, how are women so powerful when it comes to voting? Because it seems that when we talk about the numbers, we don't talk about the numbers in terms of how women galvanize, activate, motivate, how they're the ones voting in all these situations.
So, I mean, can I just answer that question by saying, and Tolu is aware of this, we at Willan just published a State of Women's Leadership report. And it's always good to remind people, somebody might be joining us for the first time, okay? We only have 4 female senators out of 109, 17 female House of Representative members out of 360. And by the way, I hope we know that women can still run for these seats in addition to the other seats.
Yes.
I want super clear, right, exactly. And then let's come to the State House of Assembly. We have 54 women out of 990 seats in the State House of Assembly, and 14 states don't have any woman in their state assemblies. So why did I break that down for us? Because as they say, politics is local. All politics is local, right? And so if you go down to the local government, you have a lot of women who also influence their children. So when women are voting, they are not just a voting bloc on their own. They're often a voting bloc with their children, as long as they can vote, and they're of voting age, which is 18. So now, what are the issues? There are a few issues, and that's why I think this emphasizes the point about the structural imbalance. Because for what is within women's control, they show up and they vote. Women make up over 60% of the voter population, right, across board. So it tells you that when women have things within their control, which is I go and get my voter's card, I get up that morning and I go and queue for hours, right, to vote, and also I protect my vote. So those things are all within their control. It tells you that when it's time to run for office, there is more that is not within their control, and that is why we are seeing these gaps. So what is the issue? And that's why I think this is going to be a game changer. Because to your point, Tolu, why can they mobilize? Mobilizing is a skill. It is a skill, right? So why have you built capacity in this particular area? Because we've never, you know what I say is that we've just never had enough women leading to see what the benefit of women's leadership can be. We just haven't had that critical mass, you know, and you have to see it to believe it. And I think this is, in addition, what this will do. It is a structure. Should we talk about violence against women? So these are real issues that if we don't have a corrective instrument like this, then it would just take us much longer. Definitely over the 100 years that the World Economic Forum has said.
Wow. You know?
So should we go on a break, or do I ask my question?
Let's take that break.
All right. We'll go on a quick break, but when we return, more with Abosede on this matter. Stay with us.
All right, it's a conversation on the reserved special seats bill that is before the National Assembly. We are expecting a vote. Hopefully will happen before the Assembly closes out for 2025. But in the meantime, a conversation around why this bill is so important. Joining us is Abosede George-Ogan. She's joining us from Abuja in the Federal Capital Territory. She is the founder of the Women in Leadership Advancement Network and one of those who has been very vocal and active in pushing this bill forward. Inam, I think you had a question before we went for that break.
Yes. Abosede, I think one of the things I really appreciate about what Willan is doing is that it cuts across culture and all structures. I know that you've got a bit of presence, of course, in various denominations. I did catch one of your discussions at RCN at Craftsman. So I think my question for you is, how much of this is cultural and how much of it is structural? And how do factors of money, politics, violence, and intimidation, and of course, godfatherism, disappropriately shut women out?
Look, I think women, so you talk about, I love how you put it there, there's structural, there's cultural, and there's religious. I think we should name it. What women were conditioned to believe that the role women were conditioned to believe that they're supposed to play in society. And I think it brings us back to one important point that we must mention. We recognize that a legislative instrument such as this will not automatically shape the behavior of people. So that's why that cultural piece is significant. Think about it, right? So if this bill gets passed, all right, in the state, let's use the House of Representatives, okay? Today we have 17 women out of 360 seats, okay? So if this bill passes, then we go up to 369 seats or something like that, right? Or something, you know, let's say even 390 seats.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you have 50 women sitting there in the chambers, okay? It doesn't change the fact that not a significant number, but a handful of men in that chamber who have 4 wives. That is not going to change. This legislative instrument doesn't immediately change that, right? And if those men see the role of women as caregiving, as nurturing children, then that's not going to change immediately. So this is where the cultural piece plays an important role, and why we do the work we do at Willan around shaping the perception that we all have of women as leaders. Because we recognize that we were socialized to believe that women are carers and nurturers, but not leaders. Okay, and tomorrow, as I said, what would happen though? Is all of a sudden you have a woman, because Nigeria is going to be represented. It's going to, you know, these women are going to represent all of Nigeria. So all of a sudden, when now, if I asked you, do you have maybe a relative? Do you know? But imagine if this bill passes and those numbers go up and that level of activity increases, then all of a sudden we know somebody within our orbits who's a female, who's elected a female legislator. All of a sudden. And that shapes your mindset. It starts to really change how you see women and the role we play in society. So that's where this can actually influence the cultural. But I think that we also need to continue to do this push, whether it's with religious institutions, whether it's with traditional institutions, we must continue the advocacy to our traditional leaders. I don't know if you know this, but I was physically at the event where the Sultan of Sokoto endorsed the reserved seats. That's very powerful. He is the highest ruler of the Islamic religion. And so what that immediately means is that he's telling everyone who has used Islam as the excuse for why this bill cannot move forward, that actually this is not what the Quran says. It was very powerful and very significant. And that's what I think the momentum on this bill is going to. This is a game changer. I think that Nigeria is at the cusp of history. I also think that the 10th Assembly has a legacy opportunity, and we're counting on them.
Okay, so up to this point, we've talked about why the special seats bill exists and the barriers that it's trying to dismantle, but it's also facing a lot of criticism, and I want us to take a look at what that criticism involves. Now, we know that some say that the concern is more philosophical. They argue that democracy should be about open competition and not about reserved spaces, and that ballots should be earned, or rather leadership should be earned at the ballot and not allocated by constitutional design. So, Abosede, I want you to take on some of the criticism. There's a whole bunch of it, and we can list some of it because we have some graphics to show you about that. But what do you say? How do you respond to people who say the special seats bill would actually weaken Nigeria's democracy or reduce women to symbolic figures in parliament? And is Nigeria's current political system even merit? So for many people who are complaining and criticizing this, they even need to ask themselves if Nigeria's current political structure is even merit-based in the first place before they start complaining about us trying to address this. So do you think that this is against Nigeria's democracy? It's against competition? Would it reduce Nigerian women to symbolic figures in parliament?
Not at all. The one thing to make clear is that this seat is not inferior or superior to any of the seats. You have equal opportunity and equal powers to any legislator. And I think that's for the people who are saying that it will be tokenism, it will diminish the role of women. Honestly speaking, allow me to say, if it's easy, make you run them like that. As in, it is not. It is not. And I think that we need to stop it. We need to stop giving, saying these things like, oh, women. Why is it that we have a Nigerian woman leading the World Trade Center, World Trade Organization? It's enabling environments. There are no structural barriers that inhibit or prevent her from actually accessing that office, okay? But here, it is not so. There are structure, there are so many, okay? So that's the first piece. It is unconstitutional. That is absolutely. And as I alluded to earlier, 41 African countries have done it. Let's not even go outside of Africa, right? So if it was unconstitutional, are we saying all those countries have issues? No. Democracy is government for the people, of the people, by the people. It should be representative of the people that are in government, that are in that society, right? But our House of Representatives is currently not represented or representative of me, right? You can't have only 17 women out of 360 seats, and then you tell me that that is representative. Tolu, another concern that people have that you didn't mention, but I want to mention, is the financial implication. People already think that we have one of the most bloated legislators in the world, right? And that are expensive. But the Policy and Legal Advocacy Center, PLAC, has done in-depth research on the cost of these additional seats. And guess what? It will be less than 1% increase in the annual budget.
Wow.
But what are we talking about here? And you and I know that so many things go into that annual budget, right? That we can't even account for. So less than 1% will be 0 point something percent. So I hope I've been able to debunk, especially women. I want women to stop saying this thing about tokenism, symbolism. Look at the chambers. Look, you can see it on your screen. It's filled with men. Women cannot even push for something that improves the lives of women and girls because, as you know, the nays will have it because there are more that are against them than more that would go in favor of them. So I really need us to understand that we are fighting for the future of our daughters. We are fighting for our future. We're fighting for where budget goes, gender responsive budgeting. How much of the budget goes to issues that concern women and girls? So I think if we inform people more about benefits of Jasiri women, maybe people stop saying these things. And like I said, I know the other concern is the financial piece, but the research has been done, the evidence. If you care to read, to understand, you will know that the benefits far outweighs any negative that anybody can raise.
All right, Abosede, but is there a risk, that political parties might use these seats to recycle loyalists, rather than empower independent female leaders? Because I remember Tolu talking about women being their enemies, right? So how do we ensure that women elected through special seats are influential lawmakers and not, sidelined voices?
Fabulous question. And I have two responses to this. So yes, we definitely expect that it will be competent, capable, and all that, good stuff, qualified women who will occupy this seat. But my personal opinion is that let them just be women.
You just want to start there.
Yes, because my theory is very simple. The men who have been there, how far? No, how far?
Valid question.
So if you are telling me they will bring their girlfriends, because people have said that, they'll bring their loyalists, they'll bring their wives, they'll bring their daughters, share their female, let them go there. They will not see them pushing bills that are against women when they are a significant number and close them. I am convinced that there will be a knock-on catalytic effect when the numbers increase. So I think that is a debate that is not founded on evidence, all right? However, there is sufficient evidence for when men lead in Nigeria.
And we're living the reality of it.
Now, I want us to look at resistance because we know that anything that has the potential to make history is always going to have people that are the naysayers, like you said. How much resistance have you seen from lawmakers, and where exactly is it coming from? Is it coming from men? Is it coming more from women? Is it coming from political parties or state governments?
Right. So I was very active, actually even more active than I am now, in the 9th Assembly when we pushed for this bill. And you would remember as part of the 5 gender bills, which were thrown March 1st, 2022, as a Women's Month gift, I guess, to us. And what I can tell you is, post that, we actually came together as civil society and did a post-mortem. And some of the things that we identified are some of the things that I think have been corrected this time around, okay? So we identified where the resistant points are in terms of whether it's the caucuses within the National Assembly, whether it was based on religion, culture, a geographical area. And then I think the other piece, which I think is the most important piece, is that the people power is so important. And that's why I appreciate make time for us to have this conversation on your platform. Because I personally believe that we need to make the cost of not passing this bill higher than the cost of passing the bill. And that is what happened with the Not Too Young to Run bill, if you remember. Where it was clear to lawmakers that our young people will not have it if we don't pass this bill. Okay? And I think that we have momentum now in the public. I think there is more awareness, there is more enlightenment, and people understand it more than the last time. Now, do we have resistance? Of course, we would have resistance. I would say that there are still people in the National Assembly who have reservations. Some would argue that, in the Senate, we have only 4 women, but one of those women has given them a lot of trouble, right?
Yeah.
So do we want more of that, right? Do you know what I mean? So we've had things like that, for example. But, again, whether it's, I think we've seen, I don't know if you've paid attention to the endorsements. We've gotten endorsements from governors. We've gotten endorsement from traditional leaders. We've gotten endorsements from the First Lady of the country, right? So I think there are more that are for us than those who are against us. And I really think that this is an important time and moment in our history. And I really hope that the 10th Assembly is courageous enough, regardless of everything else, to pass this bill.
All right, now, Abosede, this obviously doesn't end with the Senate and House of Representatives in the National Assembly. Now, beyond, the National Assembly, what is the groundwork, being done to get state assemblies to approve it when it gets to them?
Fabulous. So for those who don't know the process of passage, we need 2/3 majority in the National Assembly, so in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. And then we would then go to the State House of Assemblies, where we also need 2/3 to vote before it goes to presidential assent, right? So as I said, part of the people who have endorsed this bill is the chair of the speakers of state houses of assembly. And really, there are a lot of civil society, community-based organizations, groups, that are working at that level, sensitizing people for when it comes to the state, so that they know that the benefits, as I already mentioned, far outweigh, right, whatever challenges they will have. And as you know, most of their concerns there will be, are women taking over? What will our family structure, where a man is supposed to be head of the home, a religious institution saying, is it a woman that will be wearing trousers? All of those things, which we already know. But as I said, once the National Assembly signals that this is a change, that its time has come by passing this vote, I really, really believe that we will start to see a shift. Because remember that the National Assembly representatives or senators represent the people.
Yes.
So these are their constituents, whether you like it or not. And so there is also the strong signal that if the National Assembly passes this bill, then the state assemblies sort of look at that signal and say, okay, if my House of Representative member supports this bill, if my senator supports this bill, why would I be the one to oppose it? So there's that powerful signal. And that's why I really believe that the National Assembly are the ones who have an opportunity to make history here.
All right, so up to now, much of this conversation has focused on access, who gets in, who is shut out, whether the rules of the game are fair. But there's another question that I think many Nigerians are also asking, sometimes quietly and sometimes very loudly. Does representation actually mean changed outcomes? And you've touched on it in some of the answers you've given, but I want us to really focus on it now. In other words, if more women enter the National Assembly and state houses of assembly, what shifts? Not in theory, but in real life. How might that shift also affect laws around education, healthcare? You've mentioned gender-based violence, social welfare, and economic inclusion. You said that we see the evidence of men leading. We as a country have never really experienced full female leadership. And so there are examples around the world. So what would change for Nigeria with the inclusion of more women at the table, where we are making laws at the federal level and at the state levels?
Well, thank you so much for that question. I want to make it practical. No matter how much a man loves his wife, his daughter, and all the women in his life, his mother, he doesn't understand what it is to have a period. He doesn't understand what it is to carry a child and birth that child, or the importance of needing health care in that critical moment. All right? They're just some things that are only lived experience.
Yeah.
All right? And if you don't have people with that lived experience sitting at those tables where decisions are being made, then it means that those lived experiences will never make it to policy considerations that shape society. That's the way to look at it. All right? And then if you come to the fact that women are the primary carers and nurturers of children, then you talk about education. I have heard countless stories of people who will tell you that their mothers sold everything. Their fathers died when they were young, and their mother had multiple businesses to ensure they went to school, but she was illiterate. This is what God has put on the inside of women. God created them male and female for a reason. We are supposed to be co-leaders because we bring unique experiences, right, to the table. And you were alluding to what has happened across the world. During COVID, what was the evidence? Very simple. Women instinctively are more empathetic, number one. So most countries and nations that were led by women closed their borders quicker because they weren't focused on the profits that the nation gains from things around export. They were more concerned about human lives, number one. Number two, women are humble and not as egoistic. So they were listening to the science and to the experts. Ego is a strong feature in men and we love them, right? But it means that they are more less likely to listen to somebody saying, this is what you should do, this is how you should do it. And so we saw this practically play out during COVID. It was like a case study situation that the instincts and what women, because women lead differently from men, and this provided an opportunity for us to really see, okay, this is how a man will make a decision under this circumstance, and this is how a woman will make a similar decision under this circumstance. The final piece I want to talk about is the budget. Who gets the contracts? Where does the money flow? Who has the big businesses? How many women are billionaires and can write checks, as we hear that the billionaire men write when women want to run? So these are the things that will shift. The economic structures will shift. The priority around healthcare, education that leads to better outcomes will shift. So it is not women for women's sake. I really need us to understand that this bill is not about women. It's about the nation. It's actually a national imperative for us to have sustainable development, because right now we don't have it.
Abosede, before we wrap up, this final question, I want to quickly sneak it in. If we change nothing, no special seats, no quotas, no affirmative action, realistically, how long would it take for women's representation to improve on its own? And additionally, what would that mean for Nigeria? Just 1 minute. If we sit and do nothing historic, we have a National Assembly that doesn't take that chance, that doesn't push the envelope, that doesn't think about themselves as change makers, what would happen for Nigeria?
So in 2027, and we don't have to be prophetic. If nothing changes, this bill doesn't pass, the numbers will go down. Simple. The numbers will go, because the evidence is there. We have been on a downward trajectory. That is what we have been on, right? Whether it's in the Senate, whether it's in the House, the numbers, we've been on a downward trajectory. So the numbers will go down. And then if nothing changes, then nothing will change in our country, because we already know what it looks like. And that's my point. We already have the evidence for when you have only one gender leading. The evidence is overwhelming. We've had it now for 65 years. This is my point, right? So if nothing changes, then nothing will change in terms of improved livelihoods, in terms of security of life and property, because there is no woman sitting on our National Security Council.
All right.
Right?
Yeah.
There's no woman.
Well,
so nothing will change. And that's it, Tolu. I think it's important that people know that the cost of this bill not passing is that your life remains the same. Now, if you're happy with your life and with the way everything is, then well.
Abosede, yes, we've actually run out of time. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. Always.
Thank you so much, and thank you for always having me. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pass the bill.
Pass the bill.
Well, now today's conversation, has taken us beyond slogans and sound bites into the hard realities of power, access, and representation in Nigeria. The debate over special seats for women is not simply about numbers in parliament. It's about whether our democracy truly reflects the people it claims to serve. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about how political systems can exclude, how inequality can become normalized, and how long wait your turn has been used to silence half the population. Now, whether you support the special seats bill or still have reservations, one thing is clear: when elected into office are empowered, accountable, and effective. And if it fails, the question remains, what alternative path is Nigeria willing to take to close the gap? And that's it for today on Jasiri. Thank you so much for joining. See you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.